Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, and I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. I'm joined today by Sara. Sara, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, hi, Dr. Gleb. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sara Baier. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am the head of HR at a company called Plume Health. We are a telehealth provider for trans individuals.
Mhm. Excellent. Now, being a telehealth provider, you are quite familiar with distributed work. So I want to ask you, what is the situation with distributed work at Plume Health?
Yes, all of our employees are distributed. So we are a fully
Hmm.
remote company. And this does a couple of really positive things for us, which we'll talk about in this interview, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
excellent. So tell me a little bit about the benefits of the free benefits or other more if you have of working in a fully remote manner.
Yes, absolutely. The biggest one really is that we have access to a wide talent pool.
Hmm.
When you have a smaller company where you're in one or two locations, you really only have the talent pool in those
Hmm.
areas. And here we get to choose from the top talent throughout the entire country, which is a really
Nice.
huge benefit for us. That also coincides with our model for healthcare. Because
Hmm.
we're all over the country, we also have the opportunity to hire the most helpful and knowledgeable medical professionals that we can that really
Hmm.
help our patients reach them where they are as well. Something else that really is helpful for us is that it reduces our overhead
Okay.
because we have a physical location. We're not worrying
Hmm.
about building costs. We're not worrying about, the licensure that you have to have in a different city and
Hmm.
that sort of thing. All those things are really positive for us.
Excellent. What about the challenges? So what kind of challenges have you seen with remote work? What are the three biggest challenges? Maybe some others. What have you seen as the challenges associated with remote work?
Absolutely. I think the biggest one in from an HR standpoint is the state
Mhm.
and local compliance, the legal compliance with all
Mhm.
laws. Of course, if you're familiar with things like FEMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, that's the federal
Sure.
law. Many states, many locations have their own version of that law. And
Mhm.
so you're, kind of juggling which one is the best for my employees, et
Uh,
cetera. And that can be a little bit complex.
mhm.
Something else that can be a challenge is I myself am on Pacific time and my boss is on
Mhm.
Eastern time. So there's a 3 hour time difference. And so that can be a little bit difficult if you're looking to get
Mhm.
something done throughout the day. And then, the other piece that I find challenging is designing equitable compensation packages across the
Mhm.
board. You've got somebody who's living in like Billings, Montana, and then you have
Mhm.
somebody doing the same job who's living in San Francisco. The cost of living is dramatically different. And
Mhm.
so figuring out how do we make sure that we're being fair and competitive to our employees
Mhm.
without, having golden handcuffs for the person in
Mhm.
Montana is really that can be a challenge. That can be tough, but it's definitely fixable.
So let's talk about how you fixed it. So let's start with that last one, the compensation. I can definitely see. I've worked with a number of companies that are fully remote, and they've all chosen different strategies for how to approach the compensation issue, and including in compensation, not simply the compensation package itself, but things like office supplies, kind of supplying the remote
Mhm.
work capabilities for people, which also costs different things in different areas. So I'm curious, what is your approach to compensation?
Absolutely. What we use for our straight compensation, which is just the base salary, we use
Mhm.
data modeling through a survey provider. And what we do with that then is we tack on a premium for those people that live in a higher cost of living area.
Hmm.
Look at for that is I look at the cost of living versus the cost of labor. So the cost of
Mhm.
labor is when you have a certain role in, say, Portland, where I am. If you've got an HR person, the market here dictates how much an HR person at my level would make, and so that's the cost of labor. Whereas if I went
Mm,
to another area of the country that has a similar cost of living, the cost of labor might be more or less depending on
mm,
how highly my role is valued in that marketplace. Now, the
mhm.
cost of living has to do more with how much does it cost to actually live there. And so we have decided to use the cost of living instead of the cost of labor. And
Okay.
that way, not looking at different employees in the same job market as maybe
Mm,
a different cost of labor tier. And then as far as office supplies go, we do have a stipend that we have
Mhm.
for employees that have home office stipends and that. And if there were a larger expense that somebody needed, like say, for example, they didn't have the money to buy a sit-to-stand desk, but they would like one, those are
Okay.
things that we
Yeah.
consider as an offshoot for the budget.
Nice. Yeah. Myself has have a standing desk, as you can see, definitely very valuable. Good. Let's talk a little bit about the time zone difference. And I want to talk about that as a more broader topic of how do you deal with differences in different venues, different cultural settings as well. So different people across the country, if you work at the same place, then you have the same cultural standards and norms, times, and everything else. How do you deal with differences in people's local context, whether it's their difference in time, difference in culture, difference in work style preferences that have to do with geographical location across the country?
Sure, that's a great question. We really look to set some basic standards, and then we let
Mhm.
employees be pretty flexible from there. We, as an employer, strongly believe that people will do their best work if you allow them to be themselves and bring their whole
Mm.
selves to. And part of that is, if you want to work a little bit earlier in the day or a little bit later in the day, we
Mhm.
don't have a problem with that as long as you're getting your job done. And so one of the things we've done is we've suggested that people work on Mountain Time, which is where our
Mhm.
company is headquartered, which is Denver. And
Mhm.
so I flex my time, excuse me, for example. So I start at 8 o'clock Portland time, which is 9 o'clock Denver time, and that works well for me.
Mhm.
Another thing we do is we really set up our job responsibilities in such a way that they can be tracked. And so
Mhm.
if your manager is looking for something and they're on a different time zone from you, they know what you're working toward, and you have regular touch points where you're saying, this is what I'm working on, this is where I'm at, and those things. And we use a number of different tools, different project management
Mhm.
tools and that sort of thing to make sure that we're all on the same page. As far as cultural differences go, that we don't have such a high swing there because we're
Mhm.
all behind a mission.
Ah.
And we tend to attract a certain type of person who's really
Mm.
mission driven and cares about, people's healthcare, that sort of thing. And so there's not so much of a cultural difference in the workplace that I've seen. By
Ah.
and large, we all get along very well.
Mhm. Now, when you talk about people getting along well, how do you make sure that people build those bonds when they're not located in the same place? How do you make sure there's cohesion among teams and people build good relationships, not simply to the culture of the organization, but to each other?
Absolutely. Well, because we are a startup, you are kind of forced to work together in a really cohesive manner.
Mm.
Because everybody's pitching in and doing a lot of
Mm.
different things that maybe isn't in a job description.
Mm.
It's not as strict as somebody who might be working in a much larger organization that's been around for a long
Mm.
time that has all these processes and that already set up. We also like to use our tools like Slack. We have something
Mm.
called Nuts where you can be introduced to a coworker and spend a half an hour just getting to know them.
Nice.
And we also do company on-site. So we call them
Mm.
company on-site retreats. And so a couple of times a year, we all get together and get to know each other and just spend some time doing some community build and that sort of
Mm.
thing to really get to know each other better.
Let's double click on that a little bit more. What do you actually do at the company onsites? I've worked with a number of companies trying to help them figure out their onsites, and there are
Mhm.
three types of things I've seen companies do. One is relationship building, team building. Another is strategic development. So trying to, when you get together, figure out the strategy for the company as a whole, or maybe sub units of the company, so various business units. And another is professional development. So things
Mhm.
that are more intense forms of professional development that are harder to do when you are in remote settings. So those are the three kind of categories I've seen. I'm curious specifically what you do, what you found to be useful at Plume Health.
Absolutely. We do all three. All
Okay.
three months in the same week. So we're together for 3 to 4 nights, so
Mhm.
it's not a terribly huge amount of time. But we
Mhm.
like to split up our days into, we have a kickoff in the morning, then we typically will go into some strategy session. What's the next 6 months going to look like, next six
Mhm.
months to a year going to look like, and how do we work toward that? And then we'll also do some professional development. I've done things like ways of working, how to have complex conversations, that sort of a
Mhm.
thing. We're also considering some outside resources, things like maybe a disc assessment where we would have a trainer come in and do that with us
Mhm.
as a group, that kind of a thing. And the thing that's unique about Plume compared to the other companies that I've worked for is that we only have about 70 employees, which is the smallest company I've ever worked for.
Hmm.
And what's nice about it is that because there's so few of us, we all really have a chance to get to know each other pretty well. And like I said before, because we're a startup, we all have a chance to throw our hat in the ring to do a lot of different things.
Nice.
So when our offsites, it's really like we're coming together and having a little celebration of getting to be together and getting to see, how tall people are. You get to see each other's shoes for the first time. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. Well,
Yeah.
excellent. So when you think about the future of remote work at Plume Health, where do you see the evolution going? So you're right now a startup. When you're thinking about going further, you'll have more complex teams. You'll probably
Mhm.
need to work more on onboarding, maybe mentoring of junior staff. That's not so much of a concern. At least this is what I see when I work with larger companies that are growing from startup mode to a little bit more established in the 100-ish people range. What do you see as the patterns and challenges down the road, maybe a year or 2 years from now, as you're developing your approach to remote work at Plume Health?
It's a great question again. I really see, as we grow larger, as the team expands, you tend to get more of the personality clashes and more
Mhm.
of the uncertainty around who's supposed to be doing what and when. My approach to this is going to be to really have very strong organizational development conversations with the leadership team before we get into headcount planning. So before we really
Mhm.
expand, we're going to define what the roles are, really talk about who on the team already has some of these skill sets, where can we level people up, who needs a mentor, all those sorts of
Mhm.
things that help people to kind of understand how to work together and how to grow their skill set in their career with Plume. I think our company will likely remain fully remote, simply because the way that our business is set up, in order to help service Plume's members, we need to be all over the country.
Mhm.
And this way, we really do get to reach as many people as we can with our healthcare setup.
Mhm.
And it's a really strong benefit for the employees as well. I am not entirely sure that there will be a terrible amount of problems, honestly, because I think if we put the infrastructure into place now and really get used to working in those patterns, that
Mhm.
should help alleviate some of the common growth pains that happen as companies grow.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. This has been very helpful, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show, and it helps us improve the show.